Okay, so we did our project on the 1997 Mars Sojourner rover. And here's like a short video on it, just kind of goes over like the basics.
In Andy Weir's novel The Martian, stranded astronaut Mark Watney uses the Pathfinder lander to reestablish communications with NASA. But it wasn't just Pathfinder that he recovered from its landing site. The Sojourner rover was there as well. But what exactly was the Sojourner rover? That's today's Martian tie-in on Physics. NASA's Pathfinder lander reached the surface of Mars on July 4th of 1997, but it wasn't alone. It carried with it a small microwave-sized rover called Sojourner. Sojourner was the first rover designed to rove Mars without any attachment to its lander. That means no tether for communications or power relay. And interesting historical note before we go any further. Sojourner may have been the first successful rover to rove the surface of Mars, but it wasn't the first to actually land on the red planet. The Soviet Mars 3 mission took with it a small Prop M rover. The Prop M rover was designed to stay attached to the lander with a tether that would give it power and relay information. The Prop M rover was designed to stay within a tether's length of the Mars 3 lander. That way it would always have power. And because the Soviets weren't sure what the surface of Mars would look like, they used skis instead of wheels for this rover. It was designed to kind of shuffle along the surface. But the Prop M rover never got to shuffle its way across the Martian surface. Mars 3 landed in a death storm and the mission died not long after it began transmitting data. But back to Sojourner. Like the Pathfinder lander that brought it to Mars, Sojourner was a proof of concept rover. It was a small six-wheeled rover designed with a rocker bogie suspension system designed to give it clearance over small rocks. It reached Mars inside the Mars Pathfinder lander, which meant that it had to get off the lander and onto the Martian surface, which was done by a ramp. Two small guide rails guided the small rover off the landing platform and onto the Martian surface. Once there, it had some autonomy, but it was largely controlled by a driver on the Earth. The driver used images from the rover's cameras as well as images of the rover from the Pathfinder lander to determine what the rover was facing. If it was facing a giant rock that it could climb over, the driver would order it to go sideways to try to go around the rock. If everything looked clear, the driver would order it forward a small distance, enough to make sure that it didn't run into a hazard that it couldn't see in the image. But this was a painfully slow process. Depending on the relative positions of Mars and the Earth at any given time, communications could take around 10 minutes one way. Sojourner was never intended to last very long. All of its major objectives, mainly roving, taking pictures, and a few samples, were all packed into the first 7 sols of its activity, a sol being a day on Mars, which is about 24.7 hours. But Sojourner, like Pathfinder, far outlived its design life. The small rover lasted 12 times longer than it was designed to go and went far further than the 33 feet it was intended to go from the lander. That's because the extended mission was basically free time for NASA. Why not push it and see just how far it can go? Images of Sojourner's wheels, both tracks they made and abrasions on their surfaces, told NASA scientists a lot about the Martian surface. The rover's alpha proton X-ray spectrometer did take some measurements on the composition of rocks and soil, and it sent some 550 images back to the Earth through the lander. Sojourner didn't actually have a communication system that would allow it to talk directly to NASA. Sojourner continued pushing further away from the Pathfinder lander until September 27th, when communications with the mission ceased without warning. Probably because it was the first time we did it, Sojourner will always be my favorite little rover. What do you guys think of the microwave on wheels? Let me know in the comments below, and as always, leave other questions and comments below as well. Be sure to follow me on Twitter at AST Vintage Space for daily Vintage Space updates.
Okay, so that was the video, and here's a little slide that is like just the intro about the rover. So on July 4th, 1997, the Sojourner rover landed on the surface of Mars, and it was delivered to the surface by the Pathfinder lander, and this made it the first Mars exploration rover. And it was only like 25 pounds, so about the size of a microwave, and it was designed to last a week, but it ended up lasting 83 days on Mars taking pictures, and it returned 2.3 billion bits of information, and this included more than 16,500 images from the lander and 550 images from the rover, as well as more than 15 chemical analyses of rocks and soil and extensive data on winds and other weather factors. And the location where it landed was called the Aries Valleys, And this location was chosen because it was like a floodplain and it was also relatively safe. And it was named after the American civil rights crusader Sojourner Truth. Okay, now we can talk about the design and development of the rover. So it was designed to demonstrate a low-cost method for delivering a set of science instruments to Mars, and it was a six-wheeled vehicle of a Rover bogie design, which allows it to cross over obstacles up to 13 centimeters in size. So that's about the size of its wheel. And it landed on the surface of Mars using an airbag landing system, and a heat shield slowed down the spacecraft to about 400 meters per second in about 60 seconds before deployment of the airbags. And the rover bogie wheels and the frame are made of aluminum, and the scientific navigation and the communication instruments are made out of resin, and it was built by the Jet Propulsion Laboratory for the National Air and Space Museum.
Okay, so now we can talk about the current uses of the rover. So as it was mentioned earlier, it still isn't running today. But when it was running, it used its cameras to take pictures of the Martian landscape and sent back more than 550 pictures, which we talked about. So this has helped us to this day because it helps us with our current space expeditions by letting us see what the surface of Mars looks like and what to expect if we venture there. It used instruments to study nearby rocks and dirt, which we talked about. So again, this is currently helping us because it's helping us realize Mars composition and realizing, how this planet is, I wouldn't say designed, but what it is. It was designed primarily to demonstrate a low-cost way of delivering a set of science instruments, which we talked about, and then its final resting place. So just a little bit more on the design and development. So the solar panel, like for the design, how it functions, there's a solar panel backed up by nine primary batteries, providing up to a 150 watt per hour. This combined panel battery system allows micro rover power users to draw up to 30 watts of peak power. Well, the peak panel production is 16 watts. The normal driving power requires for the micro rover is 10 watts. So, yeah.
So why and how this idea came to be, why they did the mission, and why they made the rover. So it was part of the Mars Pathfinder mission, and it was made to deliver a lander and a free-ranging robotic rover to the surface of Mars in a cost-effective and efficient manner. And I found that off of one of the sites that we did. So NASA made this robot as a cheap way to get science instruments onto Mars. I knew it was pretty cheap because the rover was really small. Like they said before, it was like the size of a microwave, and it was one of the first rovers that they made. One of the first like science, like space instruments, I guess you'd call it. only meant to be on Mars for like a week, but it ended up lasting longer. So okay, so some of the fun facts. It's been 23 years since the rover landed on Mars. The Mars Pathfinder and the rover brought us about 15 chemical analyses of the rocks and soil that they have on Mars, and along with other data on like what the weather's like on Mars. So kind of like what they said before. The rovers started more advanced rovers to be made like Spirit, Opportunity, and Curiosity. So they kind of improved, like the ones that I listed, the rovers, those are newer. They inspired it off of this one. That was kind of like the first. It was the first one. So like, okay. It was made in the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in California. This Mars mission was the first that used mainly the internet, to tell the public about the mission. And they also captured pictures, so they could put the pictures on like the news and on the internet, so then more of the public could see what it looked like. So the last data transmission received from the Mars Pathfinder was on September 27th, 1997. And then the communications failed. That's why they had to terminate the mission like 5 months later. Okay, we hope you learned something new. Thank you for watching or listening.